Hey everyone, welcome to Anyreach Roundtable. I'm your host, Richard, where we give you insights into the leading AI trends with experts across different industries and verticals. I'm joined today with Alex, the CEO of Passport Global, where we'll talk about turning international fulfillment into a growth engine and the future of AI and e-commerce. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thank you, Richard. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. So you've been at the intersection of finance, tech, and startups for over a decade. What led you to create Passport Global, and how did you see the opportunity to modernize global e-commerce fulfillment?
Yeah. Before even I do that, I gotta say it's a very interesting topic you have here as a podcast. I myself have been, keyword searching these terms, trying to learn about how AI can help my business. So I'm definitely going to be tuning into other ones. Very, very interesting stuff going on. Anyway, I got started with international e-commerce through a company called Lynx, Lynks. It's actually still around. I co-founded that company with a friend of mine who I met while working at Facebook. It's this guy Mustafa. He was from Egypt, and like he lived in Egypt, and he was so good as an engineer that Facebook found him. He won some algorithm Olympiads, and they hired him and got him, a visa and all this kind of stuff to come and work at Facebook in the U.S. So very very talented guy. He was in my noob class. That was like, they have opening classes where you have not Mark at that point. We started in 2010, so not it wasn't like Mark Zuckerberg at that point, but we had Chris Cox. You know who Chris Cox is? He was like their first chief product officer and one of the very very first hires. I think he's still there actually. Very very talented guy. One of the creators of the newsfeed, the concept of a newsfeed. So very talented guy. Anyways, and he would come speak to the class. This guy Mustafa became a buddy of mine, and he had friends, obviously still in Egypt, who would ask him to buy stuff in the US and ship it back, either like via DHL or when he would go back to Egypt to visit Egypt, to put it into his suitcase. And I myself was born in Russia. I came when I was 3 years old to the US, so I didn't really have any friends that would ask me to do that. But like distant relatives every once in a while needed some like medicine or some kind of rare thing that you can't really get in the former Soviet Union. So would have to go and figure out how to ship it. So there's actually a really, really big industry around this of helping people abroad buy products from the US. And most of these companies, sometimes they're called like personal freight forwarders or box consolidators, because the other model here is like you do online shopping, like you're in, even Canada, let's say, you do online shopping on Amazon and Etsy, whatever. It's actually pretty expensive to ship like one small box at a time. So what you do is you kind of group it all together, you put it in a locker, and it's a service that these companies provide, and they'll like consolidate these tiny little boxes into one big pallet, and they'll ship it over to your house or your warehouse or something like that. So usually those companies are based in Delaware, because Delaware is a tax-free state. So we set up our operations in Delaware. I was not the CEO. Mustafa was the CEO. I was like the operations person. And I helped with the warehouse and figuring out how to ship products all over the world. And because we weren't really in control of what people wanted to buy, sometimes people want to buy cheap things, expensive things, small, tiny things, like jewelry, and then like big things like surfboards, sometimes edible things, like nutraceuticals. I kind of had to have a crash course in a really broad swath of cross-border e-commerce and how it works. And I realized it was super complicated. There's obviously the physical logistics, but then there's the duty and tax calculation, and that itself has many things to it, like HS codes on the product. You got to know the country of origin. It's a lot of things. Then there's regulatory compliance. Like some things are regulated, especially things that you kind of put on your skin. Like cosmetics was a very popular product we ship. Anything that you ingest, that gets heavily regulated. Um, Customer support is a different beast. Like people speak different languages. They have different expectations around transit time. I mean, like so many things, right?
Mm.
Um, don't get me started on returns. That's like a whole other beast of a problem to solve and headache to deal with. Um, but in my position, the customer doesn't care. The customer in Egypt, they don't care how hard it is for me to set this up or what you have to do and whatever. They just want like a good service or whatever. So I had to solve this under the hood, and it was really complicated. And a lot of what I did was trying to figure out how to reconcile between systems. Like here's something really interesting, Richard. Um, how much you charge in your shopping cart for duties for this product is kind of disconnected from what you as the merchant ultimately get charged at the border for that product.
Mm.
You could be like, why is that? Well, a million reasons, a million reasons, a million reasons. One reason. It's a split order, you know. One item, like you don't have both things in stock. One item you send right now, and the other item you send later. That changes a lot of things, because on one hand, in the cart you're looking at this combined order, and it's like $200, and you have to pay a certain amount of duties for it for Canada, like shipping to Canada, let's say for instance.
Mm.
Okay, that's about $200. That's above the Canadian de minimis. Below 150 Canadian dollars, you don't have to pay duties. This is above. This is 200. Okay, so you have to pay duties. You charge the customer duties. But when you ship it to two separate packages on 2 separate days, and now this product is only $100 below the de minimis, and this product is $100 below the de minimis, and you don't get charged duties. That's like, bank error in your favor, to a certain extent. You've collected it, but you don't have to remit it. But then there's the reverse that happens as well. It's below the de minimis, but at the 3PL, they put in like a freebie, because your U.S. domestic customers, they get a freebie. They get like a little T-shirt. Boom, that bumps you above the de minimis. You didn't collect duties, and now you're out duty. Just like two examples that are common, but there's like a million things that could go wrong. So that was one of my insights in running ops at this personal shopping service, that like these systems, they need to speak to each other. They need to be consistent. And that was my brainchild for Passport. I wanted to create like a modern stack for e-commerce, for e-commerce merchants to be able to essentially service a global market in a turnkey, easy way, and be free of those literally daily, sometimes hourly frustrations that come up with international. And having been on the side of receiving those frustrations, I kind of knew where 80% of the problem was, and the 20% of things that you can do to kind of solve that. I kind of knew what those were. I just described one of them as like reconciling the duties that you help a brand charge up front versus the duties that you actually end up charging the brand. That was a big one. There's like a bunch of other things. So started Passport, and here we are.
Got it. Well, first of all, thanks for sharing kind of the pain points there. I think there's a lot of relatability here, both for me on a personal and a professional side. It's interesting when you talk about, friends carrying different products, to and fro. I'm originally from Taiwan, and my family members always say, buy the iPhone in the US and bring it over because it's so much more expensive in Taiwan. And kind of vice versa, I've seen, part of different Chinese groups where folks will actually build a community and say, hey, we want to buy Asian snacks, but obviously buying it one by one is like way too expensive. So let's buy it in bulk and all bring it over. On the professional side, you mentioned some pretty good kind of points around international shipping. I remember my first company where Ombre Labs were selling kind of genetic testing. And we had customers come in from, Southeast Asia and so forth. And It was two major problems. The first one is the shipping just took too long. One way, getting the product to them took about 2 months. And then they had to actually sample themselves and send it back, and that took another 2 months. So all in, probably took about like 4 to 5 months for this person to get a test result. And then also on the pricing side, yeah, depending on how you price the product and what you charge the customer, there's all kinds of hidden fees. And so we've seen this with folks that are international, buying our kits, where the tax was like more expensive than the actual product itself. And so we had to kind of like navigate all that stuff pretty manually. And obviously with Passport's kind of turnkey solution, that would have solved a lot of our problems. So as you kind of think about international logistics and obviously all the recent pain points around tariffs, as you mentioned, returns, slow shipping, how does Passport Global use automation or smart systems, maybe different types of partnerships, to essentially simplify that experience for brands?
Yeah, I mean, we've tried to infuse our whole company essentially from day one with automation. It is becoming much easier with AI, and we're still, I'd say like on the like we ourselves, I would say, are on the cutting edge, but the cutting edge keeps moving forward.
Right.
Every other week, I feel like I hear about something interesting another company is doing. So I'll give you some of the low hanging fruit of things that we're doing. So one big thing is we work with some really big merchants, 9-figure brands that have, in some cases, over 100,000 SKUs. Yeah,
Wow.
like a lot of products
Yeah.
sold, and they're constantly refreshing those products. So it's one thing to like onboard a client, fine, take a month, review every product or whatever. But what are you going to do 4 days in when they upload 17,000 new SKUs, for the new season? You don't have like a month to clean it up, make sure that it has the right information, right? So there's some of the things that we do you literally can't do without automation, and then yeah, you try to keep pushing the envelope to remove the human in the loop as much as possible and have like a higher and higher percentage of things that are just cleaned up. So the things that we do on automation is assigning harmonized tariff codes. That's this like universal number that customs agencies around the world have collaborated to accept as a common language around identifying products and identifying even details within products. So there's like one thing you could say, it's shoes. Okay, so that's helpful, and that puts you in a certain category and so forth. But what you really need to know and what you really need to disclose to the customs agency is how much leather, what's the insole like, all of that, what are the other materials involved. And then you need other information. You need country of origin. You need also a description. And it can't be like summer box or whatever. It has to be, like pretty helpful
Yeah.
for the customs agent. And sometimes they'll let something through if it's not good. Sometimes they won't. But you're more likely to get it open and stopped and investigated further if you don't have good, clean, identifiable information. And then you have the declared value. We'll get into the declared value as a separate point here. But just the HS code, the description, no, AI or any automation, it can't tell you where this thing was made, but it can like flag some stuff. Like it can probabilistically identify that this item, given what it is, like a plastic toy, it almost certainly was not made in the U.S. So if it's declared value as U.S., that's something that our QA systems that are obviously run on AI and automation can flag to us and give us a heads up that that we should take a look at it. Like, look, maybe it is made in the U.S. Maybe it's custom made, and who knows? Maybe this isn't like an Etsy client or something like that, and it's getting it wrong. But it is worthy of a human flag to see. But nothing can tell you if it's like made in China. Like, how is it supposed to know? Obviously. But descriptions, it could know, high level products If you remember Silicon Valley, is this a hot dog? It's greatly advanced since then.
Yeah.
Um, and the HS code classification is also really, really key. So it does the first pass,
Mm.
and we can start letting brands. It's so accurate now that we can start letting um, brands sell their goods, especially if they're not in like a heavily regulated commodity like a nutraceutical or something like that. We could start letting them sell it, but we will have like humans that go over some hot spots that the AI might not be the best at filling out or identifying, and we do spot checks, of course, but that's a big one. That's like a
Mm.
long pull in a lot of tents. I'd say valuation is another big one. There's also like basically that big issue that I was talking about, of what's in the cart versus like what's being shipped.
Mm.
AI and automation in triangulating those two numbers, it's also really helpful in identifying where human should step in and, identify the source of truth and, what happened here, why are these two numbers different. So we do a lot of that. Of course, we use software. I don't know. If it's okay to plug certain softwares
Yeah,
on the
absolutely.
pod. Yeah, absolutely. All
Yeah.
right. So we just migrated to Foresight
Mm.
for our like customer support automation. They seem to be doing a good job, so that's really working well for us. We try to have as much of our customer support, handled with helpful bots and have human
Mm.
downstream of that, ready to jump in if the customer experience isn't going to be good. So that's another big area, I'd say, of automation for us.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's super interesting. I think one of the examples you mentioned about, a client having like 100,000 SKUs. I mean, that already is like, the volume of, things to check is already pretty immense. But then you add in that each SKU has a ton of metadata, then
Yeah.
it's literally impossible. You also kind of leaned in on human in the loop as kind of a core need in terms of working with kind of the AI systems and so forth that you guys have deployed. How do you see that kind of evolving for your business as you're getting human feedback? And one of the things we see here at Anyreach is that fully agentic AI is pretty far off, and you still need a hybrid approach, right? Humans still need to essentially check the output and the quality and feed that back to the system for it to improve. So, how are you guys thinking about kind of the infrastructure of your schemas, your data quality, and then how do humans ultimately play into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I knew just from um, industry intel that
Mm.
the agentic AI is essentially at 100%, I would still have human in the loop to
Right.
double check that. You know what I mean? Like the seriousness of the errors could be
Mm.
pretty big. So I would say that human in the loop would be there until we fully validated, and it would take us, call it like 6 months at least, to fully validate something like that, maybe up to a year for some processes and systems. Um, but that is not what I'm hearing. I think what you're saying is more consistent, is that it's still not really quite there to be foolproof, you
Mm.
know? And if you're talking about like top of funnel, I think it's like acceptable to like send out one out of 100 emails that's like stupid, and just like a little bit off base. I think that that's acceptable. When you're talking about a client that signed up for you that's going to be like penalize or charge or create a bad experience for their customers, like we're not in a position to make those choices on behalf of our customers, you know what I
Mm.
mean, and risk that. So we kind of have to have um, uh, uh, human in the loop to fill in the gaps.
Mm.
Um, I think for us, what we're doing is we're definitely augmenting our team as much as possible. So like we probably would have had to hire like three people that look into HS codes or whatever, I don't know, something
Mm.
like that, like in the last month, but we did it, you know what I mean? And we just have the same person that's just, she probably still looks at the same amount uh, products, but that as a numerator on the denominator of the number of total products that are running through our system, it used to be like maybe she looks at 1%. Now she's looking at 0.01%. Now she's looking at 0.001%, something like that, right? So
Yeah.
she keeps getting more and more leverage, which is awesome. That's what we want to see. Um, and at the same time, we're building an infrastructure, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do here. We ourselves are like researching this pretty actively, but I'll share with you and the audience what we're doing here is we're trying to set up like a data lake with both structured and unstructured data that will try to break down the data silos. It's a generic term, but there is some thing to it. Trying to break down data silos so that we let individual teams with their own like software and processes and whatever kind of figure out how to do what they need to do without having to go through. I mean, you're probably going to still have to go through like some engineering and we have a data team and some data, but as little as possible, to be honest with you. We're trying to not make every single agentic action take a whole project, a whole initiative, that spans multiple months. We're trying to kind of cut down the time and effort by standardizing things and making all this kind of information accessible. And when the time comes, for some teams, they can't use it at all because it's still not quite there yet. But it will be, like you can kind of see the writing on the wall. So when it's there, we have this infrastructure and we can move quickly. Right now, there's so many low-hanging fruit that we're just like picking off from like everything from top of funnel, like doing research for our BDRs to go out, like little things like that, to some customer success, flags like, the spend on this customer is down 3 weeks in a row. Like, take a look at it. Don't take any action yet. But like some flags, it used to take a human to kind of go into Tableau. That's our data system. Go into Tableau, type in the customer, visually see, sales are down. Let me make a conclusion.
Yeah.
And you could obviously build some triggers, but you need some logic on top of it or there becomes too much noise. We did that too, and we still have that. We have triggers, That's an example of a trigger that we have. Like if sales are down, whatever number of days or weeks in a row, the customer success manager is going to get a communication about it. We have that, but like frankly speaking, there's just so much noise because we have a lot of like subscription accounts and like the triggers. Then you got to like add more logic to it, like exclude companies that have a history of it being down, because it's a subscription company, and it gets a little bit tough, and you start to get a lot of noise. So it's nice to have some AI on top of it to kind of like consider the information, and really trying to like surface some much needed stuff, because we started to find that our CSMs were like just too much noise. They were like reacting to things that don't need to be reacting to, and they were kind of missing the important things, that were kind of hidden a little bit. So it's nice to have some AI analysis on top of those data trends. That's another big area that we're seeing some interesting things as well.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You think about like triggers and notifications being so rules based, and if you don't control that, you're going to be kind of swamped in this noisy environment across the company. And so it's interesting to think about, even for triggers and notifications on things that are impacting the business or your clients, to actually have agentic AI on top that goes through all of it and like summarizes, provides insights, and is able to prioritize the right filters, if you will, for your team, so they can be more effective and not swamped in all the pings that happen, right? And so, you mentioned that turning international, especially for e-commerce businesses, is a 10x revenue driver. What are some merchants missing when they expand globally, and how do you help support your clients in that fashion, and any sort of AI that you've kind of baked into doing that?
Yeah. So let's frame this just a little bit. If you do nothing today as a merchant, and all you do is you just allow somebody outside of we're talking about like US brands, let's say, and you allow customers outside of the US to purchase off your website. You just make it accessible. You ship to the US, maybe you even go so far as to collect duty and taxes and ship what's called DDP, deliver duties paid. The percentage of your international will be like single digit, sales. Just overnight, you start monetizing that traffic that you are already getting. Maybe like you're, we were pitching recently a stroller brand. They're a really strong stroller brand, and they made it on all the mommy lists, like the top 10 mommy lists. And you know what? Guess what? People in New Zealand read those too. And sometimes the New Zealand top 10, they make it. Like they look at the U.S. list, and you'll make it onto that. So you'll start getting some sales just based on that. You didn't put any effort into New Zealand or anything like that, but you'll still see some sales. That'll be like single digits.
Mm.
You can literally 10x that. So you could go from 1% to 10%. You could go from 2% to 20%. Maybe even up to like Nike, by the way. More than 50% of Nike sales are international, but they're like super truly global. So that's like something to aspire to.
Yeah.
So that's what's on the table, I'd say, for brands. For a brand that really does everything to optimize international, they can get their international business to call it like 20 to 25% of their sales. If you're a US brand, you could get it up to 20-25%, which is incredible. It's a lot of revenue, potentially a lot of revenue growth, and a lot of money that brands are leaving on the table. So how do you get there? I would say it starts top of funnel to bottom of the funnel, and I'll talk about how AI can, how we've seen AI can really accelerate that and expedite that. So let's start top of the funnel. Like, how do you get customers now? Well, probably the most common way is just performance marketing, Meta, Instagram, right? Instagram, TikTok, right? That's like the most common way. Well, international audiences, and let's do one more customer segmentation here. There's English speaking and there's not English speaking, right? And I would say English speaking, it's also tied in with like American culture, Western culture, kind of the same movies, the same celebrities, obviously the same language, more or less. People speak English in Canada. You can't really like tell, like American culture, Canadian culture is very, very similar. There's a lot of overlap. So obviously they have their own thing, but there's also a lot of overlap. Same with UK, Australia, to a certain extent EU. That's where we see, call it 70, 80%, in some cases 90% of a brand's international business. It's Canada, UK, Australia, EU. Okay? So let's start with that. You can programmatically with the AI that's already built in with Meta, and they're so good at this. They're just so incredible at this, to do like audience lookalikes, right? That's not even something for you to do. That's something for you to just engage with these platforms and let them run their magic and target top of funnel, the same customers that you have there. You can get to the like optimization, and if you sell pants instead of selling pants, say trousers, when you're selling into the UK, like little things, like instead of the Golden Gate Bridge or Statue of Liberty, you might show Big Ben, and AI can obviously do a lot of really interesting image background swaps that look so natural, especially on a very small real estate, like on a phone. You can't really tell the difference, and tell that it's built by AI. So there's ways of like localizing even that, like image experience, in like when brands, they want to show a diverse client base, right? That means a certain thing in the United States, right? In Canada, diversity, like if they want to show a diverse group of people, that means something a little bit different in Canada. And it means something a little bit different in UK. So you can, like Canadian audiences, they kind of can tell when when an American brand is trying to appeal just to an American audience. It's subtle, but you could kind of tell. So AI can be really good at swapping out some of that imagery. That's something super cool. And then there's like that next step. of like, okay, let's say we want to go after the Latin market or the Asia market, and now we're talking about not just um, different imagery, you know, but you're talking about a different language, and you're talking about like a different sense of humor. You're
Mhm.
talking about oftentimes, um, different culture and all that. So it's a little bit harder. I personally haven't heard or haven't seen even AI be able to help with that. It's still
Mhm.
like at the end of the day, a super hands-on experience. Of course, you can do the window dressing and change words into Spanish or something like that. A million softwares exist that do that, but they're not great even still, and they still miss some of that cultural context, and it's still kind of a little bit goofy and a little bit distracting, and people can tell, and you got to make the decision, is it worth it, and you got to test it. I'm
Mhm.
not sure, maybe just keep it in English and you only attract the English speakers, but that's obviously an optimization for the incremental. It's like 20% of your international, which is already only 20% of your total, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm not sure how worth it is to go that far, but AI certainly, there's probably going to come a day where it's going to be able to do like Swahili, as if like you're a native Swahili speaker and you really understand the people and the culture, and it changes, the Albert site to be so like Swahili friendly. I could
Right.
see a day where that comes, but we're obviously still pretty far away from that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you brought up a good point. That's actually something we're doing here at Anyreach when we create our voice agents, where, voice and speech is so important in the human experience, but it really kind of varies, as you mentioned, between languages, between cultural nuances, what type of humor is going to fly for different regions across the world.
Right.
And one of the things we do is the human in the loop process, where we have different experts in the space, whether you're in customer service or sales and so on and so forth, that actually trains our voice agent not only on the language itself, but also how you navigate conversation. Because these nuances is pretty, it hasn't really been mapped out, if you know what I mean. And it's such a key piece to be able to sell or support any specific kind of different audience, different location, especially international. So that's definitely something on our sites as well, and I think that's a lot of relatability there. So. When we think about Passport Global in terms of your platform, obviously it integrates with all the major e-commerce platforms like Shopify and so forth. Based on these partner integrations, what are you seeing in terms of the role of AI in the larger ecosystem of e-commerce platforms and tools?
Yeah, yeah. So at one point, this is like a year, 2 years ago, something like that. I made some post, and it was about Shopify. They need to build Shopify, but predicated on AI. I called it
Mm.
Shop with AI, Shopify. So I hope they bought the URL because it's actually a pretty good one. They they're building, like Copilot, which is really interesting, like to help you build on top of Shopify. It's interesting because Shopify, they're built on Ruby. They're built on an infrastructure and a reality that was a reality, like, how old are they? Like 20 years at this point, something like that. Well before AI ever reared its head or something like that. So there's a lot of AI native solutions
Mm.
that are being built right now, being dreamt of being built, you know, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. So, is it going to be like you just dream it, you write it, and it just like builds it for you, right? So, like this concept of like going on the Shopify app store, and it has all these apps, and you find the right app, and they've cultivated this amazing app ecosystem.
Mm.
Does that become irrelevant because AI can help you write custom software specifically what you need, really, really quickly and easily? Obviously, it's not even close to being there for that yet, but you could kind of see, like a little bit that's kind of where it's going. How far away we are and what that actually means, and so forth. But there's that version of AI, and it's just our job at Passport. We're an internationalization solution, and we want to be accessible for any platform, for any manifestation, be it mega like duopoly platforms, or it's like a million different platforms for every like subvertical. We want to be accessible via API and provide these little tools. These like microservices that power internationalization. That's how we see our role. So we would just want to be friendly in the whole ecosystem. But anyways, back to what AI could do here. So it could be that it could be like build a store with AI super easily.
Actually, I think I saw a recent startup that was doing that for Shopify. It's like kind of like a lovable cursor type of thing, but for Shopify, it's like just natural prompt and we'll create your store. Interestingly enough, my last company, we were on Shopify and just like updating a site with liquid themes. My goodness, it's just a pain in the butt. So yeah, but continue. I thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit.
That is interesting. That is interesting, and that's exactly right. They're the best at dealing with the world pre-AI, no question about it,
Yeah,
right? But how relevant is the App Store, some of these tools, you know what I mean? Like all of that in a world of AI. You could
right,
dream it and make a movie. Like, do you need all of these like editing softwares that can take like
right.
what about if you don't need that, so anyway, so that's really interesting. I personally know of like for I wouldn't even say necessarily e-commerce, although e-commerce is going to be a part of it, but like build a website using natural language prompts, you know what I mean? And if I personally know for, I'm in San Francisco, so kind of connected to the startup community here, but there's probably like literally 1,000 around the world, and what's going to be interesting is each one is going to be hyper focused, not each one, but there's going to be some that are like anything for anybody. Okay, there's
Right.
those types like Squarespace, and there's like I'm just built for influencers. I'm just built for fashion. You know what I mean? For like
Right.
this particular vertical, this particular thing. And then I think there's going to be some other things that we don't even know how it's going to look or work.
Yeah.
Versions of AI with e-commerce, and that's like agentic shopping and shopping
Mhm.
on new UIs and new platforms. You've probably seen like Perplexity has like Perplexity shopping.
Yeah.
I use Perplexity to do research, to do product research.
Mhm.
It's not a far leap to assume that I would just transact on Perplexity. It's
Right.
possible. And then same point for all the LLMs. I could see myself transacting on chat. I don't right now, so let's see what happens. I could also see. I could also see like, you know, um, uh, my wife and I collaborate on buying stuff around the
Mhm.
house or something like that. I could see myself collaborating with an AI and just telling it, go buy it, go find the cheapest one and go buy it. You know, yes, boss. Like Google's it for me, Perplexities it for me. Does like a little stack ranking. It knows what like my
Your preferences
criteria. I've already
are.
said yes to all these products, and it just like buys and goes looks for some coupon codes and whatever, and transacts on my behalf. So like does the Shopify, they had this study. It was really interesting. Like
Mhm.
they had Deloitte, I think, something like that, run this like who has the best conversion rate, checkout in the world. Guess, surprise, surprise, it was Shopify, and they did the study, and of course, like I actually think that they have an incredible checkout experience and all that, but
Yeah.
they have best conversion rate. Okay, of course, human transacting on a web interface, that's not going away, but like does that even matter if it's like an agent transacting?
Right.
Does like conversion rate optimization, how does that still even work? I mean, like you can see a world in
Mm.
which when an agent does the searches and the comparison shopping for you,
Yeah.
um, that's a whole different set of things you're solving for, and I think like entrepreneurs are going to solve for that scenario, and I actually kind of already starting to see some of the early signs of this.
Yeah, you actually brought up a really interesting food for thought. If shopping behavior changes, as you mentioned, in the future, let's just say that you do have kind of like your superhuman personal shopper that's fully agentic, knows all your preferences, your previous purchasing history, and it just goes and runs, right, to go buy things for you. Are we going to still have the same type of shopping funnels where you add it to cart, right, go to checkout, go through a purchase funnel, and so on and so forth? That whole paradigm could be completely shifted, right? And how are these platforms and businesses, in the e-commerce space thinking about that? Now, who knows where that future is? I strongly believe, I think I heard or read a quote where, the next generation, every person that's born is going to have their own AI, like right from the start, right?
Mm.
And it's going to be trained on your entire life, right? It's going to have all the memory and the context of everything you've gone through listening to your life story, if you will, continue to be personalized based on who you are. And so
Mm.
that might even go into like robotics, for instance, right? You're born with a robot attached to you
Mm.
at birth that is able to support you in everyday life. So quite a lot of paradigm shifts. I think that even we're not really quite sure what that's ultimately going to look like, but really interesting points as you mentioned. And so, kind of thinking about the pace of AI innovation, you mentioned a couple of things on like the QA process for your internal team. Any other sort of, more practical models or tools around AI that, you see your team adopting, engaging with, and even for yourself personally, anything that you use on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, maybe we could trade some notes on this. Let's start with this, Richard. I started to research a good note to AI note taker.
Mm,
To take notes on my call on my iPhone, to record and transcribe notes for calls like this, and maybe not this, but like calls with like a customer or a colleague or something like that. So I heard really great things about granola. You know
mhm.
granola?
Yep, yep.
Do you use granola?
I don't, but yeah, I heard it's freaking amazing. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump on the bandwagon there. Yeah.
So granola, this thing kind of pissed me off a little bit, but they didn't have the desktop version for Windows, like too good for Windows over here.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the same problem I run into. The computer I'm on is a PC. No one ever builds for us. You know what I mean?
I know nobody builds for us. Yeah, it's crime. So I started to look for alternatives that do support, and I got recommended Circleback,
Hmm.
another YC company. And I got recommended Circleback by a buddy of mine who works at a hedge fund and is not in the tech space, and
Hmm.
he's like really good at finding these kind of tools to like augment his workflow and so forth. So I'm in like day 4 of trying it out. I had been using Gong. My team still uses Gong.
Yeah.
Gong is, do you know Gong?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gong is really good. Gong is really good. Our sales team uses it, and I used to use it. But the problem is, our setting is that like everything is public. We want to learn from each other, whatever. And I'd have these calls that were a little bit sensitive, and Gong would record, and then it would like make its way into like the sales queue, and everybody could see this call.
Yeah.
So I had to go in and hide it, and it's just kind of a pain. So I need to get my own that's like kind of not connected to my company, because as CEO, I have a lot more confidential calls, I would say, than like
Yeah.
most people in the company. So I just needed my own software. But so like it's funny. I don't know. I think this is a coincidence, but you never know these days. But like day 2 of using Circleback, I got
Hmm.
an email from Granola saying that they're letting me into their Windows beta program.
I'm sure they have some BI signals like, hey, holy shit, this guy just converted here. Time to send him an email to try to convert him back. So, yeah.
It very well might be somehow they know, and they have some like automation set up. I mean,
Yeah.
they are an AI first company, so I'm giving Circleback a chance.
Mm.
But there's a couple of things that there's a couple of scenarios that I'm not quite able to handle, which is um, like if I want to transcribe my phone, it doesn't let you record it on your
Right.
phone, maybe like legal reasons or something like that. So then if I try to do it from my computer, that means I have to have it on speakerphone on my
Right.
phone. And sometimes I don't want to be, I just want to be. So I don't know if you have a solution or you've heard of anything that can transcribe phone calls.
Yeah, there was a hardware company. I'll send you a name. I totally forgot what it is, but it's like a pendant, like you put it on your neck, and it's just constantly listening to kind of what's going
Oh, yeah.
around you. So,
Friend?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think
I know
OpenAI's
those guys.
recent acquisition of Johnny Ive's company is trying to build something similar, right? So I think in the next maybe 1 to 2 years, is going to be probably more prevalent where you have a piece of hardware on you that's always listening and it's always like
Yeah.
AI context aware, and you don't need meeting note takers anymore. You don't need XYZ software because if you're standing for your computer or you're at a conference in person, right? And that's the thing that I've seen kind of like the hardest. I'll get calls from clients on my personal phone, or I'm talking to them in person. It's like none of this is being logged, and I'm like, what
Mm-hmm.
do we talk about? I'm trying to recall all this information, right? So
Mm-hmm.
but my day-to-day workflow, I probably have like 20 agents running different things. It saves me about 25 hours a week of work. I'll give you a
Mm-hmm.
couple examples. So I have a chief of staff agent that pulls in a whole bunch of data that is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And every month, essentially, it takes, builds out an investor update, if you will, pretty automated.
Mm-hmm.
So that obviously goes through approval process for me. I add in additional more context, and then I shoot that over to our investors, and it also shoots it to the team as well. So everybody in the
Mm-hmm.
company has context of the high level KPIs and recent highlights and so on and so forth
Mm-hmm.
across the business. And then I also have a networking agent. So the problem I was trying to solve is
Networking agent?
networking agents. I'll tell you a little bit more about what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, tell me.
So as you know, as CEOs, you're constantly, being a router of different relationships. You're trying to nurture these relationships, keep them warm, and so forth. Whether they're investors, employees, candidates, customers, and so on and so forth. So pretty much after every call, one of my agents puts you or anybody else that I've had a conversation with into a spreadsheet of my connections. And it enriches like 20 to 30 columns of information about the company you're associated with, industries, and so on and so forth. And then that gets shot out to the folks I've chatted with, and my value add to them is like, hey, based on this 10,000 list of different people that might be a customer, might be an investor, and so forth. Feel free to filter, find the person that's interesting to you, and I'll do an automatic double opt-in. So I have an agent that actually listens to that individual, says, "Oh, I want to talk to XYZ person," drafts up that email, and I shoot that double opt-in to that right contact, and obviously get the connection. But on top of that, our CRM logs all those conversations. So, if I've talked to someone maybe last month, it'll actually automatically generate a email based on the last conversation, based on any recent news about that person, and so on and so forth. To say,
Wow.
hey, Bob, nice, we chatted last month about blah blah blah. Congrats on the new, fundraise that you just closed, and so on and so forth. How are things going? Would you like to catch up again, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
one of the key problems is like keeping warm and on top of the inbox of people that you've chatted with, because you could talk to someone 6 months ago and you just never hear from them again, just because they're not aware, right, that you exist again. So I have a bot that does that as well. So that's two of 20 that I utilize, and then another workflow is when I'm building kind of prototypes or full stack applications, using kind of AI native tooling. I'll generally have like four reasoning models running at the same time. So your O1 Pros to your Groks, Anthropic, Claude 4, and so on and so forth. The reason why I do that is because obviously reasoning models take some time to like process. So I can multitask different things, whether I'm doing lead research on an account, or I'm trying to have AI generate a prompt for front end development, so on and so forth. Right? I can essentially have like four pseudo PhD level folks actually running tasks for me, and it's you just go back and check what's the output and go integrate that. So So that's another one of my workflows. I have way too many subscriptions with all these AI companies. My
Mhm.
LTV is probably freaking amazing for these guys, but that's one thing I realized to scale up kind of my efforts, especially kind of in this age of AI. So, um,
Mhm.
but yeah, more things to share there. We're always learning. There's always new tooling that comes out, and so that's pretty exciting. So, well,
Richard, I'm curious. Have you seen any tools, or do you use anything for management, like you know, watching somebody's like let's say even sales, like watching somebody's gongs, reading the transcript, seeing how the grading the salesperson's performance, looking at their
mm,
stats, and kind of like giving a middle manager some leverage. That's something that
yeah,
we're starting to explore internally.
yeah, that's a good question. I don't know what CRM you guys use. What?
Salesforce.
Oh, Salesforce. Okay. So we use a TO, which is like an AI native CRM. So the columns you can actually pull in all this information, and then prompt it, naturally to create these workflows, if you will. It's also great at pulling in all the accounts that are synced, right? So your email, your calendars, your calls. So it has all this context automatically to be able to prompt anything, right? So if you have a column that says, "Oh, grade this call based on this criteria, based on this data set," able to populate that. So we use a TO pretty religiously to do it. For instance, our podcast pipeline. There's so many steps. You got to generate questions, you got to research the candidate, and so on, or the interviewer or interviewee. So we actually have AI columns, if you will, all across the board for every status. So when a person's moved over, boom, click play, boom, all the questions are generated. The emails are automatically sent out with all the personalization. So that's one thing that we use for kind of looking at sales details of like all the previous context and then deriving insights from it. We're also building out our own kind of custom Gemini 2.5, where we're able to take all the repos of all the sales call, all the transcripts, and because Gemini is multimodal, it can actually listen to the audio and see the vision aspect of it. That's kind of the future scope, but to be able to pull in all those data points, because a sales call is not just the transcript, right? Not just specific keywords. It's kind of like phase one, but phase two is like, okay, what are they actually saying? How are they saying it? What's the tonality, the rhythm, and so on and so forth. And then also looking at as close as you can to like body language with vision, right? And to be able to take all that and then derive insights, like here's what the account looks like. And one of the things we're doing here is like creating sales playbooks automatically by industry, because we are a horizontal platform. There's just so much data and details across industries, decision makers, and so forth. No human can actually go through that at scale. And so we're building out playbooks by industry, by decision makers, based on all that context and data using Gemini 2.5. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Awesome. Love it, Richard. Very cool. Hey,
Yeah.
this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, Alex, this has been super eye-opening, and I'm sure my audience agrees. Thanks for sharing, your experience, Passport Global, what you guys are doing in AI. For the listeners who want to follow up and learn more about you and Passport Global, where can they find you?
Yeah, Alex.Yancher on X, and then
Mm,
I'm LinkedIn, just my name. Not
mm.
that many Yanchers out there, so I'm pretty easy to find. And then my email, alex@passportglobal.com.
All right, awesome. Well, Alex, thanks again for joining Anyreach Roundtable, and it was a pleasure to chat.
Thanks, Richard. Great to be
Absolutely.
here.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.